Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. G'day everybody, and welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. On today's show, I have calling all the way in from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Mr. Trent Lalonde. Trent's an old friend of mine. I met him up on the ice in 2006. He's been in the industry for a long time in various capacities, most notably as a single truck owner-operator where he had great success. One of his current projects is to have truck driving recognized as a trade, and he's going to fill us all in how we think that's going to be accomplished. On next week's show, I have Karen Levy, sociologist and faculty member at Cornell University, whose recent book, Data-Driven Truckers, Technology in the New Workplace Surveillance, was reviewed by yours truly at American Affairs Journal. I've been looking to get Karen on for quite a long time now, and we've had some delays, but we finally got it together, and I'm looking forward to getting that to you guys next week. Other upcoming guests include my anonymous friend Joe. Joe has worked in the charity and nonprofit and government sectors, specifically in getting people placed at new jobs and helping people seeking work, and he will describe to us the various ways that truckers are brought to the CDL mill system through his former employers. In a couple of weeks, we should be having my friend Brett joining us to tell us all about his homeland of South Africa and its current slide degradation, as it were, and what lessons we can learn from that, and how similar things are afoot here in North America and what we should be watching out for, so what's happening in South Africa now doesn't also happen here. This episode with Trent is episode number 20 of Voice of Gord. I didn't think I was going to get this far, yet here we are. I was going over a list of upcoming guests I have. I thought I was going to be taking a break this summer, but I literally have 24 different shows, guests, and various ideas laid out. At least 20 of them are confirmed, and I just have to figure out dates. So I've got quite a bit of content coming to you guys, and I just wanted to say thank you for sticking by me. Thank you to those folks who've expressed interest in coming on the show, and those of you who've accepted my invites. It's been a lot of fun. This has been a good creative outlet for me, and I've received a lot of good positive feedback. As always, I take no advertising, no sponsors, and I rely on y'all for word of mouth. So, like I said, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Please share this show with anybody you think might be interested, especially your fellow truck drivers. While we're here, I'll give a little shout out to my friends Mike and Yogi down in Australia, where I'm also syndicated on the On the Road Australian radio network. I understand Mike had some technical difficulties there with my RSS feed, and by the time y'all down under hear this, he would have had those worked out. I hope he didn't throw 18 episodes at you all in a row. You'll probably be sick of hearing from me by now. All right, well, down under, Canada, America, the Netherlands, Spain, wherever you're listening to me, thanks again for listening to Voice of Gord, and may I present to you Mr. Trent Lalonde. G'day everybody, and welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're going to hear today, I'm real glad to talk to this guy, old truck driver friend of mine, again from the ice. I just spoke with Eddie Plotnikov, and today I'm very happy to present you Mr. Trent Lalonde, all the way from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He's been trucking since forever. Been an owner operator, freight broker, worked for big trucking companies. Has seen the whole business from many angles. A very politically active guy in his home province, a commentator, and just an all around good dude. Mr. Trent Lalonde, g'day.
Hey, Gord. Good to see you.
Yeah, I mean, we're all looking a little bit older.
Yeah, you're still with that. I think when I met you, God, I was 36 or 37, and you were calling me old then. How old are you now?
I just turned 44 in February.
There we go. Thank you, old man.
It sure feels that way. Trucking will do that to a guy, especially with little kids. I mean,
But it, yeah,
you have the advantage of having started early. Your children are mostly grown up, and mine are just little yet. So it's like an extra. It's gonna age me some more here.
trucking is such a love-hate thing, isn't it? Like I look back and 30 years, right? And while I haven't traveled the world the way you have, I have been all over North America. And what an incredible adventure. Like you leave home and you go for a week or 2 weeks or however long you're gone. And when you get home, it's like, where do you begin to talk about what all has happened? Because really, I love that part of it. I really did. Still do. It's the other stuff that wears a guy down. And I think, maybe that's a problem. Maybe because it can be such a great job and such a great adventure and so much fun. And it really can be. Even on the bad days, I loved it. Um, Maybe that's why rates keep going down, right? And maybe that's why we don't get treated the way we should, because there are people who will always go for that adventure end of it. To work in a warehouse, to work in an office, to put up with that drudge every day, working in a hospital, I doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, well, everybody's got different personalities, right? And trucking attracts. It's not to say that there's one trucking personality. You meet all kinds of people out there on the road, but it does have to lean towards a certain kind of either independence of spirit or grumpiness or introversion or just happy with being with yourself. The adventure part of it, absolutely. I mean, I didn't let the oceans get in my way, and I wanted to go trucking in other places. And yeah, every trip's an adventure. You never know who you're gonna meet, especially if you're doing OTR stuff or working the load boards, going all over the country. Doing random shit like going up on the ice. It can be quite fun. So why don't you tell everybody where exactly you grew up? I don't think you're from Saskatoon originally, and maybe you could tell
I,
us how you got into trucking.
I was born a few blocks away from where I live right now. Actually, it's walking distance. But
I thought you were up in Meadow Lake.
yeah, and Nipwan, my dad he was a businessman, and he would have a business for a few years and get bored with it and sell it and buy another one. And he was in all kinds of different businesses. And one of the businesses he was in was trucking. So when I was in my early 20s and I didn't have a steady job, my mom actually told me, she said, why don't you get your class 1A? You can work for us hauling logs here around Meadow Lake for a while. And you'll always have jobs. She told me how her brother, my uncle Jim, he had his 1A, and she said he always had a job. And she was right. So I thought, well, I'll try it for a year. I'll do it for a year. That was 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I just, like I said earlier, you fall in love with the job, you fall in love with the adventure, and you mentioned going on the ice. That's where you and I met. And the greatest part about the ice, I mean, that is an adventure, right? It's cold. It can be boring at times, but it's the guys you meet. I remember, excuse me, one fellow we worked with, Trevor. He's passed since. Great guy, God rest his soul. He starts telling me this story about how the night before he was in Fort Providence, a bunch of them stopped. They noticed somebody had a hub heating up. And truckers check their trucks all the time for people who think that they don't. Good ones do anyways. So they had to pull those wheels off, chain the axle up. You're in the Arctic. You got to get the truck in. Uh, they switched loads around, and there was a group of guys. One guy had a wrench, a wheel wrench. Another guy had this, that. They pulled together, got it all done. And when he's telling me this story, the way he starts off telling me the story, he said, Trent, you should have been there because that was a great time, right? They pulled together and they got the job done. And that was the best part about being on the ice is you work with a group of people who take the job seriously and quite honestly, lifelong friends. You and I have been friends now, what, 20 years, close to it. And other guys as well. You end up, you had Eddie on the other day. I hope you told him I said hello. And you just, they're guys, people who want to get stuff done, who love the job and want to get it done. You're not worried about money because you're just getting it done. And that was the greatest part about being on the ice to me.
Yeah, and the camaraderie you build it, when you speak to people that have been in the military, served overseas, or people that have worked in some other, team environment or in small groups doing something that's out of the box, not of the ordinary, they kind of feel the same way and develop these relationships. And I had such a good time on the ice. And of course, it's about the people. You, Eddie, Gavin Smith, Jamie Gravel. I got to meet Alan Scrabba up at Lupin once. Man, that guy's a character. They're just
Kevin sees him all the time. Kevin Metcalf.
Oh yeah. Oh, how's Kevin doing?
Really good. Really good. Yeah. Yeah. Him and I took a Harley ride out to Vancouver Island a couple of years ago during COVID. That was fun.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Want to hear an interesting story about COVID and road trips?
Sure.
So there's you know what the Cannonball Run is, right?
Absolutely.
A year or two before COVID started, the fastest record for the Cannonball Run had been set. These guys had a Mercedes and they like put a second fuel tank in it, and they had the apps like Waze and Trucker Path and a CB, and they have these underground internet forums where they like get people to come out and run tail and run ahead for them, let them know about blown up tires, cops, whatever. And they'd blown the doors off the old record by a couple of hours. And then COVID happens and the record got broke like 5 times in a few months because nobody was on the road. So all these people are like, cool, I'm going to go and try and break the Cannonball Run record. And they did it like 4 or 5 times in a few months. Like I can't remember where it sits at now, but it's getting awful close to 24 hours.
Yeah, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
You'd be averaging over 100 miles an hour to do that.
Yes. Adventure, adventure, adventure. So you're hauling logs at Meadow Lake, and then where do you end up?
Well, I wanted to go long haul, right? I wanted to see North America. So I worked for a fellow named Dale, still friends with him, and did dry van for a few years, did deck, did all kinds of different things. I can never seem to stay at a job. Probably a personality flaw, but I'm too old to look into that. Too old to worry about it. It's got me this far. And then, like so many people, I decided I wanted to own my own truck. So that's what I did in 1997. And I think that's a natural progression for a lot of people is they want to own their own truck. That's the progression in this industry anyways. And I learned pretty quick, it's pretty hard to make money doing that. So I could either get out of the truck or I could go all in. So in 2001, I started my own company and I ran completely independent. I did that. Well, actually, I even basically for the next 20 years, I never really made any money trucking unless it was my name on the door. You need that control in this industry. I always had offers and sometimes I foolishly took them. People would want me to work for them and, oh, come work for us. It's so good. It's so great. And this and that. As soon as you lose control, really, it's all over.
Would you attribute that to your own good business acumen and your own personality, or are you one of these guys that says anybody can do it and everybody should? Like, where do you fall on that spectrum?
My business acumen is I'm too stupid to quit. I don't give up. When it comes to mistakes, I am the first one to tell you I think I've made every one. So, although then I surprised myself and found some other mistake that I hadn't made yet, I truly believe with discipline, anybody can do it. They have to remember that it's a business. I hear a lot of guys say, "Oh, run on my own, then I only go where I want to go." Yeah, right. You're your own boss, set my own hours, and yeah, no, you're you're. I wanted to put on my business card, head slave, right? Because that's the way it feels. You're subservient to everyone. That said, it is far more rewarding. I've had a very good life from that. I'm not buying Ferraris, but I live well. It's a good life. And I would recommend it to anyone. Actually, I have other friends doing it. I know other people that have gotten into it since I've left. That anybody I know who's really made money had their own name on the door. It gives you the control, the freedom. It's extremely rewarding. And right now, keep in mind when I did it, I had to find a place to plug in my laptop to do dial up. I didn't email stuff to people through my iPhone. I had to stop at a truck stop, stand in line to send a fax whenever I wanted to communicate with people. Those were my offices, and I spent hours a day doing that.
I
Some
remember
days.
I remember the bad old days of faxing from locations in the US to get your Canada Customs paperwork in line when you got to the border, and your PARS numbers and PAPs and all the rest of that crap, and then trying to sitting on hold with Livingston forever to make sure that they actually got the paperwork so they wouldn't screw it up, because Livingston always screwed up your paperwork.
Yeah, there's still a living hell, actually. Yeah. I just, one company I know has actually considered tacking on $150 surcharge if you choose them as a broker. We're probably going to get sued for this, but anyways, maybe we should cut that
So
part out.
yeah, so you've had a great career. You've been all over the place. You're also famously politically active. I remember when I met you, you had a custom sticker put on the back of your Peterbilt that said "Free Saskatchewan" from the NDP socialist regime.
That's true. And it worked, didn't it?
Yeah, I was gonna say the provincial. I'm a little distant from Saskatchewan provincial politics these days, but the NDP haven't been in charge in quite a while now, have they?
No, it's been a very, very long time. Yeah.
But
And
they
it's
they
starting
they
to
ha- they,
show.
they had the reins long enough, though, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they did the CCF and then the NDP. Yeah. Well, the problem with socialism is it's never been properly implemented, right? That's it, it's sure to work. We just have to implement it properly. Yeah, I have been known politically, getting a little hot recently. I've had a bit of I sent you the email, struggling to
Yes,
get rest areas here in Saskatchewan. Got a promise in writing in 2019, and now to get the current government to honor it, that's turning into a bit of a fight, but I'm going to win.
you're
So,
going to win. So tell
oh, yeah.
me, tell me. So your current political project is rest areas, and you're also involved with an organization I think called Trucking as a Trade, or trying to
Yeah.
make it a trade.
I think when you take your career seriously, and a lot of people do, and I take it seriously, as do you, I listened to Lee and Lisa Schmidt, the CDL Drivers Unlimited, the interview you did the other day. That was very good. When you love your career, you want to leave the industry better than you found it. You want to move it forward, and that's true in every sense. Whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a carpenter, an iron worker, you want to improve it. They used to call them guilds, right? And everybody wanted to leave their tricks and their knowledge to the next generation. And I'm at the point in my life and in my career where I'm not there. There's fewer days in front of the horse and behind the cart, and I want to leave it better than I found it. So things I noticed, I mean, Saskatchewan in particular has a real problem with rest areas. There just aren't any, and they refuse to build them. But that's a small issue. Not a small issue, but it is a provincial issue. On a national and an international level, I want to see trucking made a trade, officially made a trade, because it is a trade.
Or at least recognized as such.
Correct. Yes, because there's so much evidence pointing towards that. Like I know when I started running out in BC. I was doing a lot of work out in BC, and there was a very bad accident. I think it was in 89 or 90 where a young guy who was only 18 or 19 years old, and he stopped at the brake check, and instead of setting his brakes up, he backed them off. So he had no brakes whatsoever. He's going down the hill at Kamloops, and it was a very tragic
Oof.
accident.
Oof.
So yeah, that was not a good one. So when I would do a brake check, I was like all of 25 years old. And I would have, that was in 93, only a few years after this happened. I would have the older drivers come over, and they were checking me, and they'd get down on hand and he'd say, "What are you doing down there? You know what you're doing there, fella?" Young fella, they used to call me. "You know what you're doing, young fella?" It's been a long time since I've been called that. And they would, but you know what? I loved it when they did that. I have tremendous respect for every one of those guys who did that, and women in there too, even back then. And they were checking on me to make sure I was doing it right. And I had been working construction prior to this, and I immediately recognized what they were. They were the journeyman or journey person checking on the apprentice. And so that from day one, that's the way I felt about it. And, they would, if they saw I was setting up the brakes correctly, and Dale had shown me correctly, he wouldn't let me go until he knew I could do it well or do it right. So I would ask them other questions, and they'd be a wealth of knowledge. And I really appreciated that. I truly did. And I guess that really set the course. I've always seen it that way. And all the evidence has always pointed to it for me. Like today, to get a job, every company wants, well, they used to want 2 years experience. Now they want 3. Well, 3 years experience behind the wheel is, well, 2 to 3 years is 6,000 to 9,000 hours, right? Well, your apprenticeship is 1,500 hours a year for 4 years. That's 6,000 hours to get a trade, right? So they already recognize it that way.
Well, some companies do, and people might want to see what the structure of those hours is like. And, I agree with you that, you should, after so many hours, you should know what you're doing. It's just how those hours are set up, right? Like in the United States, a lot of these in-house trucking schools at large carriers, they kind of do it backwards. You do your however many weeks of course it is, you pass your CDL, and away you go. Now you're an over-the-road trucker, coast to coast, wherever they send you. That's wrong. They should be doing local work and under the watchful eye, as you say, of those journeymen, or at least close enough to home that if you get in trouble, you have a problem, you're not like hung out to dry worrying about your family far away from home. There's a lot of, other stresses that come with the job that are not actually part of the job, but just they're exacerbated by the fact you're away. So when you're learning, it'd be a good idea if you weren't also stressed out about being away from home. All right.
True. You lose the support of friends and family. That's very important in life. Where it really got exacerbated, the need, or where I realized the need was great, was I'm from Saskatoon, and when the Humboldt tragedy hit Saskatchewan, and that just ripped the heart out of trucking. Kim Wiley did a brilliant
rip the heart out of everybody.
That's true. Kim Wiley, he's a trucker from Humboldt. I've known many years, and a great guy and a great trucker, a very serious trucker. He was one of the guys that helped me when I was a young man. Kim did a video on it stating what he felt about trucking and what should be made changed. So I got together with Kim, and we wrote a letter, just a basic form letter stating how we thought trucking should be made a trade. And we laid it out. It was very simple, which everybody wants lots of details afterwards, but I didn't want to get lost in all the details because that's something that can be worked out later. But what we wanted was a clear path for people to get into the industry. So, because right now you cannot become a truck driver. If you go to school and get, that's great. You spend 20 grand, go through the MELT program and get your license. Good luck getting a job. You're not. Nobody's going to hire you because they can't get insurance for you. Okay. To get
Where is
insurance,
this?
to get that job, it's pretty much impossible out here.
Okay.
Somebody's taking a chance on you. They're taking a big chance on you.
Is that like a recent thing since Humboldt, or is that like par for the course in Saskatchewan?
Par for the course in Saskatchewan. I've actually even had relatives who have tried to get in and they just can't. And it's tough. You generally you want the 3 years. Even the really big companies that can absorb an accident or two, even they're cracking down on it. It's very difficult to get anybody into the trucking industry. I don't.
Interesting.
What are you seeing in America? The
Well,
opposite.
it depends on where you are. There was an article written by this philosopher fellow named Matthew Crawford, who I'm a big fan of, and he was talking about the sort of endemic corruption that comes in a one-party state, and he was examining what's been going on in California, seeing as how the Republicans at the state level basically might as well not exist. And there's these like what they call fixers, people from various ethnic immigrant communities who sort of, make dodgy emission certificates for your car available. And one of the things he wrote in this article was that, some DMV people in California got busted handing out like literally hundreds of CDLs. So yeah, if you're in California, depending on who you might not even have to go do a test, and then it runs the gamut. There's specialized carriers here and fuel haulers and people doing hazmats who try and have a little bit higher standard. But, if you work for a very large mega carrier and, sort of make it through the basics, drug test, you do your course, you pass your CDL. Hey, you're a warm body, you're holding that steering wheel, get going. A lot of large carriers here are self-insuring now, because if you're that big that you self-insure, the insurance companies like you have in Saskatchewan that are demanding 3 years of experience and not so many points on your license, they want to make sure that you're not a cabbage. If you self-insure, well, you don't have to worry about that stuff as much. And a lot of that goes on down here.
Well, what I'm seeing in Canada and in the US, a lot of companies, one company I'm familiar with, if a driver wants to do deck, open deck, step deck, flat deck, they have to take a 2-day load securement course. And then it's a graduated license. You can only do, certain types of loads for a period of time, and then you can move up. And essentially, it's a trade. I know a large dry van or a large bulk company here in Saskatoon. You would work for them on the ice. They have a very similar system, graduated license, right? So they themselves have made it a trade. But now here's a problem with the companies doing it. People say, well, why do we need to do it officially if the companies are doing it? Guess what? Now that company owns your certification, not you.
Something similar that happened in Ontario that drove me wild when they did it, because it was a sop to big companies. When Ontario and Quebec brought in doubles where you could run 248s or 53s up and down the 400
Yeah.
series highways, the license you required to do that was not issued by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. It was issued by the company you worked for in a special arrangement with the Ministry of Transportation. And the minute you quit working for that company, your certification to haul doubles on the 400 series highways was terminated. And if you went to work for somebody else, you had to do it again. So they do, some of the bigger companies. Yeah, it's great if some of them want to take that step and have their own informal graduation system, informal training system to make better drivers. But then they do the little protective thing, which is, and as you know, I'm former libertarian. I like a light touch from the government. It strikes me that given the problems the trucking industry has, if we had that a graduated system codified in some way, and that's your license, and you have agency as a driver and owner operator. Once you've done it, now you're good to go. Because as you said, if you leave it in the control of companies, it becomes a mishmash of different rules and regulations unique to those companies, and then they can control drivers. And if it's only with those companies and not enforced by the law, you'll get the fly by nights, the recent arrivals, the people that get into the business because there's fairly low barriers to entry, and they might not quite know what they're doing, and they don't have to do what you're doing. There's an argument to be made that over time the market might weed those guys out, but in that time you get shit like Humboldt, right? That's an externality put on the public by the fact that this stuff isn't being taken care of.
And Humboldt was just one. There was another bad one by Waka, where a fellow plowed into a bunch of vehicles, stopped at construction twice in 2 weeks on the same stretch of construction near Oyen, Alberta. They had trucks plowing into people while they were stopped waiting for the construction. I don't know the cause, but this is happening, and it's happening every day. And you see it on there's Facebook groups, and all they do is show wrecks, and they'll have 10 and 12 and 15 wrecks a day.
Oh man, oof. I'm glad I'm not on Facebook. I couldn't look at that. It would probably make me sick.
Yeah, it really is. I've been off it quite a bit because of that, but it is the reality, and to try and make a change now, like you say, I mean, the system where I do appreciate these companies creating their own system, but again, it's like getting paid with company money that you can only use at the company store, right? They own it. They are used. It does get abused. Everything gets abused if all power gets abused
Right.
eventually.
So how should the trucking business organize itself? You've mentioned before that farmers seem to get whatever it is they want. Maybe you could expand on how that works,
Well, it's
especially.
not just farmers. I mean, to be able to bring in a system to a trade, we need truckers to do it, and to get it organized and recognized. And it is going to take a process. We can copy the Australian model to a certain degree, or New Zealand. There's quite a few countries that successfully have trucking recognized as trade, or at least an advanced graduated license. But how do we get this to happen? How do we get the political power to do that? Well, 40 years ago, I'm digressing a little bit, but I'm making a point. 40 years ago, there was a movie out by Monty Python called The Life of Brian. And in it, one of the big jokes from that movie was one of the characters wanted the right to have a baby. He was a man, and he wanted the right to have a baby. And that was a huge joke, and everybody laughed their fool heads off. And today you will be arrested if you say men cannot have a baby. Okay, it's gone even further. Now, how did they do that?
Maybe in Canada. Here in the United States, we still have the vestigial remains of respect for the First Amendment. I mean, they're trying to chip away at that, but yeah, in Canada, definitely Trudeau and his minions are coming to get you.
Yeah, there's a reason you escaped. But anyways, but I will respect a group of people got together and went after the politicians to make the change. And what I have learned about being in politics is there are two things that matter to politicians: IDing the vote and getting out the vote. That's how you win elections. You ID the vote, find out who's going to vote for you, and then you make sure they get out on election day, GOTV, right? Get out the vote. So the easiest way to do that, they want to identify groups. So if a group comes to them and says, hey, we, whatever you want. I mean, right now we have grown men going into little girls' change rooms, right? And the politicians are fine with it because that's an identifiable group and they want to get their votes. And that's exactly the way they think. It as stupid as that sound, you can see what happens. So you can get anything done.
It sounds very cynical, but unfortunately it's true.
It's 100% true. That's how you get anything done. So farmers, nobody messes with farmers, and God bless farmers. I mean, they use the power in a good way. They really do. I mean, where are you going to be without food? And there's a lot for agriculture, and they've banded together and they've managed to make changes. And nobody will pass a law that will affect farmers. Truckers get tickets. I mean, if you forget to sign your bill of lading, they give you a $300 ticket. They will give you a ticket for anything. At one time in the state of Washington, I always used to carry a blue pen with me, because if you signed an overdimensional permit in black ink, they would tear up your permit, give you a big ticket, and make you order a new permit. Okay, because you have to sign a legal, by law, you have to sign a legal document in a contrasting color. Lawyers actually know that, and truckers know it, because those are the rules. And that's how minute they will go after you for tickets. There's lots of big areas to give people tickets, but they will go to that length. You know why they do that? Because we're not a cohesive group. We don't stand together. Part of it is the nature of the business. I mean, you see each other and you might meet up. I think we met up in one time in BC, and I was going back to Saskatchewan and you were going down to like Kentucky or something. And you're never together that long in a group to make a stand. Now with social media today, you can do that, but we're not that cohesive group. We need something to bind us, right? One of the things that will happen is if we do make this a trade, trades famously do stand together. Now, truckers have, quite honestly, one of the, it's getting better, but the biggest group we found opposed to making trucking a trade was truckers, because they didn't
imagine that.
they did.
It's funny. I'm a big fan of this writer. Well, I don't want to call him a writer. He's a professor. He's a sociologist at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. His name is Steve Viscelli. He wrote this awesome book called Big Rig: Trucking and the Decline of the American Dream. I quote him often. And I wrote in defense of this bill last year, the previous Congress, called the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act, which would remove the exemption in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which prevents us from being paid overtime by law. So I made some arguments, both from the conservative perspective, from a worker's perspective, from a supply chain perspective, why this would be a good thing for America and for everybody. It might cost a couple of people some margins on their shipping costs, but overall, it would be better for everyone. And I made that argument in 3 different articles. And again, some of the people who criticized me, attacked me, or didn't read the article at all and just called me a communist or a socialist or whatever, or like a Biden supporter, like they just had no clue where I was coming from, were other truck drivers. And I said that to Viscelli, and he says, yeah, the people, truck drivers don't even want to give themselves a raise.
Well, it's ridiculous that a 70-hour week is considered normal, right? And that's still not enough to make a living in a lot of cases. So we do have problems that have to be addressed. And currently, the way things are looking, there's not going to be anybody left to do this job. At least not the people who love it. I know I have friends who love trucking as much as I do, probably even more. And they have left the industry because it's just beat them down too much and they can't do it anymore.
And you know what? That's a worldwide concern. So you were probably busy today and didn't see it. I was getting my logging truck, like a wheel alignment done. I just put new steering tires on it the other day. Had some time, so I banged out a new essay on Substack. Long story how I got to thinking about this, but I started going through articles from around the world about truck driver shortages. And it's like every country on earth is saying, we don't have enough truckers, we don't have enough bus drivers, we don't have enough this, that. And like as far away as like South Africa, Lithuania, Turkey, Iran, like all these countries. And I would go to blogs and news articles, some of which I linked in the essay, and they would all say, we don't have enough drivers here. A bunch of them are immigrating to Canada or the UK or wherever. We just can't produce them, right? And I make the argument that the retention problem isn't just unique to the US or Canada, because we kind of get treated like crap by the government and don't get paid enough around the world.
We can't get a washroom in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, you can't get a washerman in Saskatchewan. You can't get overtime in the U.S. in many places. What struck me, I was reading one of these driver shortage articles from Australia, and a guy in there quoted said the exact same thing you're saying. We have all these guys who are retiring, and a lot of us feel like we can't get the things we need, or we're not getting respected, or the industry's going to shit. So why stick around? And it seems to be happening in the same way in many parts of the world.
Well, the thing that Kim Wiley and I noticed, we really pushed for about a year and a half on trucking as a trade, pushed it a lot.
Is that
And
his organization? Is that actually the name of your organization?
it's him and I, actually. Quite honestly, we don't really have it as a formal organization. We stayed away from any trucking protests. There was a big rally a few years back in Saskatchewan, in Regina, and we didn't go to it. We stayed away from, what was it, the yellow vest protest. We stay away from those. We don't want to be branded with anything. And while I am political, we send our information to every political party. And quite honestly, the party that's willing to take this up as a cause is a party I'm going to support. That's which is pretty strong words for me, but I do feel that way.
Patronage.
Well,
Patronage.
it's a huge problem. People are literally dying. The industry is hurting. It is getting very difficult. I've moved out of the truck recently, and I'm in an office now, but it is my own office. And I'm hearing this from customers all the time. They're very concerned about the quality of labor they're getting. I was just speaking to a fellow today, and some of their pieces of equipment are over $100,000, right? And they said, we do not want these arriving at the customer dented up and scratched. He said, yeah, it doesn't affect the way they work, and they are industrial equipment, but it's presentation. And actually, they're concerned about them even making there. People do not want their freight sprayed all over the highway, at a major accident when someone's killed. That is not a look that they want. They don't
Yeah.
want to be associated with that.
Yeah. Public relations disaster.
Well, and as well, they I believe a lot of them actually do care, and they don't want to see anybody killed, because we all know somebody that's been killed that way. So there is a change in mood, and now maybe about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, Kim and I had a talk, and we decided to get a little more active with the trucking as a trade. And one of the reasons we did that is we started hearing it from other people. At first, everybody, oh, well, you're going to have to recertify, and then the union's going to move in. And I sat on a dock one time at a union dock, and the guy wouldn't unload my truck. And so I'll never join you. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, you had a bad experience one day. So the whole world must bow to you. So, anyways, beating up on the poor guy. Anyways, it has changed, and now we're hearing it back, and we're hearing it from a lot of people, and people can conceptualize it now. It's resonating with people that we need to be there needs to be better training. There needs to be something that's going to attract people to the industry. 70 hours is too much. It really is. Now, I know I'm not going to get into logbooks, because somebody's going to bash me about, no, I can't make a living as it is with 70 hours, and you want to limit it. But there has to be something, you've spoken about it many times, where there's no efficiency in trucking. Nobody looks at it from an efficiency standpoint. Any other industry, they want to make it more efficient. They want to reduce wait time. They want to, expedite things. In trucking, it's just, they will waste your whole day and think nothing of it.
Because
So
there's no cost attached to your time. And
exactly.
until there's like a universal appreciation and respect for that and compensation for it, why change?
And I think another reason people fear truckers getting together, because there is pushback from government on this. Normally, if they start to see a group, they're right behind it. But trucking is the only group, and maybe I'm going a little dark here, but if truckers were to actually stand together, they are the only group that could truly bring a nation to its knees in 3 days, because that's how long before the fuel would run out. All your gas pumps would be empty. Grocery stores would be empty in what, less than a week? They usually get 3, 4, 5, even 10 and 12. truckloads a night. They do fear that. They do fear truckers being organized. Jimmy Hoffa did it, and look what happened to him.
Yeah. Another interesting tidbit. You remember Chile had some problems in 1973, the overthrow of Salvador Allende. Whatever you think of that situation is besides the point. But leading up to that, the Allende government, or maybe it was the one prior to that, but I think they went through a couple of different governments, but they tried to nationalize the trucking industry in
Oh boy.
Chile. They tried to get the government to like seize it. And at that time, it was a lot of small family owned companies or trucks attached to farms, it's all small owner operators. And the truckers basically went apeshit. And I think they had a big strike, which was part of the reason it led to even more unrest in Chile because the truckers just said, no, not happening.
I was actually out in Vancouver during the container strike. I was hauling steel, so I didn't go into the container ports, but I was right beside them. And that started at Fraser Surrey Dock because the the longshoremen. Do you remember what happened there? They cut back from 13 guys to 12, so the longshoremen went to work to rule. So it created this great big long lineup of container trucks, and I would drive right by it and go over to the steel gate and go in and load steel and leave. But all these truck drivers are talking, and they're all getting mad, and they went union, and they brought things to its knees, or to Canada to their knees in less than a week. Really, it shut down the economy. And I don't want to see that. And I don't advocate that. Again, that's why I stay away from a lot of groups. But the power is there. So why can't we use that power to get the roads safer? Why can't we use that power to save people's lives? Why can't we use that power to create an industry or to get trucking industry to the point where people can have viable careers in trucking, where they don't have to give up their whole life to do it, where they can get into it, go through a program safely, where they will own in the end, they will own their red seal that they can then take to the next company and the next company, or start their own company, which again, I highly recommend. And we can do that so that then there's a career path in the industry. Right now, there's really no career path because the guy who starts out has the same qualification as the guy who's been doing it 30 years, right? As far as what's recognized. Now, unofficially, people say, well, you've been doing it this number of years, but there's nothing to really certify that you know how to do a heavy haul load, or to certify that you are an efficient fuel hauler or oil hauler. We don't have that.
No,
That would come through a trade.
a lot of that is still sort of informal and based on your experience. And that's not always even that's not always recognized. Like maybe it's because I live in this weird part of upstate New York, but like my 26 years of experience all over the place, hauling logs, hauling fuel, heavy equipment, ice. I get a lot of shoulder shrugs here. Like some of these guys here, they just don't care. Yeah, whatever. You're just a truck driver. There's no curiosity. I don't know if it's just the area I live in, but my resume, which you would think would do me some favors, hasn't done me a whole lot here at all.
Yeah, there's no recognition of achievement in trucking. And I was thinking about that this morning on the drive to work. That's something that being a trade would change. People need that. I mean, the military really has an organized system for doing that because they know it works. That's what motivates people, is that chance to move up. Everybody, it's human nature to want that next job. You're the perennial interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because they want people who have that ambition. And the ambition, the chance to promote or to move yourself forward or advance your career, they've really taken that away in trucking. I mean, when you start out year one and to year 30, there's not a lot of difference, and there's no real recognition of what you've put in. So if you want quality people who are going to take it seriously and make it a career, you have to treat it that way. You have to, build it and they will come if you
That's a
want that
very good
attitude.
point. That's a very good point. And like again, some companies are better at this than others, and a lot don't do it at all. But imagine it's like the whole concept of raising the minimum wage. When you raise the minimum wage, whatever you want to think of that, the people in the next tiers just slightly above you. So let's say you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The people
Mm-hmm.
making 17, 18, 20 in sort of jobs that are like somewhat adjacent to what you're doing, they're not getting anything. And they've already put in the hard yards, they've got experience. And now you're getting somebody who's getting a raise from the government to close to where you are, and you're getting nothing. It kind of annoys people sometimes, like that whole notion of hierarchy is kind of built into us a little bit. I mean, Jordan Peterson says stuff about that quite often. Whatever you might think of JBP, but
I'm a fan.
yeah, there's something to that.
Yeah. So we have to put that into the industry to do it. We do need the political support. I mean, that is the next, because they're the guys that make the laws. And to get them to make the laws we want them to make, we have to organize and be a cohesive group. Now, you can do that. Nobody's going to be going to meetings. We're not going to fill a union hall or anything. Oh, God forbid it's a union hall. But and by the way, while I did vote for Jimmy Hoffa twice back 30 years ago when I was in a union, I'm the furthest thing from being in a union today, being an independent for all the years I was. But what we can do is we can bond together through social media and through letter writing, through reminding politicians that we do vote. Now, every now and then, maybe we need a rally to just let people know that this is something that we need. This is a path to fix the problem. And there is a huge problem in this industry.
Yeah, many problems, but you tackle one thing at a time. And I appreciate what you're doing up there. Like I said, my friends at CDL Drivers Unlimited here in the States are trying to approach the same thing. I appreciate.
I think we need to get together. Sorry to cut you off, but we do, because it is an internet. Like when I was listening to them, I was so happy to hear that coming from another country. This is something we have to work together, and we have to push on it together. There are several groups here in Canada. There have been guys have contacted me that were doing it long before I was, and they ran into a lot of problems that the provincial trucking associations, they were the worst ones for preventing trucking to become a trade, because they didn't want an increase in labor cost.
Oh no, of course. Right? Yeah, no,
which will be inevitable.
The people that are going to get in our way the most are, the Ontario Trucking Association and Canadian Trucking Alliance. I mean, we saw this already with Freedom Convoy, and they threw everybody under the bus and
they're the ones that get quoted.
Yeah, they kiss Trudeau's ass and all the rest of it. Yeah, no, those guys are useless. But yeah, I'll hook you up with Lee and Lisa and Jim Heffernan and them guys. Yeah, for sure. So, Trent, thanks very much for coming out. I'm sorry I've kept you so long. But
no problem. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, truck drivers being long in the tooth and all that. But yeah, making trucking a trade. Pardon me?
And short on hair.
Long in the tooth and short on hair. Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much for your time, sir. Really good to see you. And I appreciate all your efforts and wisdom. And yeah, man, stay in touch.
Will do. Good talking to you, Gord.